computer. There we go. Folks, welcome everybody for being here. I got something exciting to share with you today. And the reason I'm sharing this particular deck and why we are pulled such an urgent meeting together is because of some of the things that are happening in the space. I do not have my usual setup. I flew to Miami, then I'm now in London. So every now and then I'm going to ask you a visual check. So my first visual check is my sound clear enough for you folks? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, and so what I'm going to take you through is the paper that we recently wrote right before Christmas. We launched this paper. And what this paper described is a situation I'm going to take you through. If you want to learn more, the entire paper, 35 pages, can be found on my LinkedIn profile as a featured article. We're going to summarize that paper in about 10 to 15 minutes, across about 10, 15 minutes. And then we're going to go over 5 key actions that we have found. These 5 key actions we have now vetted, ran by probably close to like 400 and 500 CROs. And we want to run these by you. I'm going to tell you which one is the most important, second, third, fourth, and so on and so forth. So that is what we're here to do. Let's get started. Let's get ready to roll. I have your chat on my screen. What I would love for you to do, if you see a question from someone, or if you have a question, type it in. We got Boris, we got Sari, we got Dan here. We're all assisted through here. And I see Ella here as well. Ella, good to see you. And so we have a number of people that can assist us with this message. And so with that said, like if you see a question from somebody else, then what I want to make sure that you do, I want to make sure that you +1 it, type in +1. And when you type in +1, other people are going to be able to, we're going to see, and we're going to pick up your question, and one of my team members will word it out live to you all and go like, and so we all know that that is being said and spoken. Okay, with that said, ready to go. What we are noticing right now and what we are experiencing is that growth is a continued issue. There's an ongoing demand for growth, but also what we now have is an added need for profitability. And this profitability and this added need, on top of growth, is causing some issues, and that we still have to grow, and we have to be now profitable in a market that is cooling down, right? Give me a +1 if you are experiencing some of this. Okay, so let me see give me a +1. Hey, we need to keep growing. We need to add profitability while the market is cooling down. If you experience something like this, give me a +1. Thank you, Taylor. Okay, the +1 starts to flow, folks. I'll sipping on my coconut here, drink down here. This is a big challenge for us, right? We see this. If it wasn't enough, we got another challenge. And this challenge is that the runway is starting to shrink. And what I mean with the runway is the amount of money being spent in order to do this versus the amount of money we have in the bank. That runway is shrinking. Why is that? Well, if I don't have the growth, but I still pay my people, my cost is going up while my growth rate ain't going up. And what we see in many cases is that companies in Q1 of 2022 started hiring in response to the ongoing growth. And they, in many cases, were advised by their VCs and PE firms. They were saying, like, keep growing. And so they started putting out job description, hiring and recruiting. And those positions were filled in, end of Q1, start of Q2. And so this group of people has come in, and, obviously you don't want to fire these people immediately. That would be very inappropriate. And so as the growth rate started to slow down over summer, the cost still started to go up. That is shortening the runway. As a response, many of those who are in leadership positions are being asked to do more with less. You now gotta hit this growth number. You got to solve the profitability, and you have less resources available to it. Second, what I want to point out is that rules of thumb that we historically used, LTV to CAC ratio, and a rule of 40, and so on and so forth, these are not accurate enough. These are great if you're a board member of a SaaS company that sits in on a board meeting once a quarter. But if you have to operate if you have to operate expenses on a week by week, month by month basis, they do not give you the guidance that you need. And then lastly, time is of the essence. We're going to talk about it in a second. One more problem that we run into, because 2 wasn't enough, and the next problem that we're running into is that we are having productivity issues. And what do I mean with productivity issues? what we are noticing out there, that there's a significant amount of people that are capable of creating activity, but not productivity. And what do I mean if they create activity, not productivity? If they write lots of email, that's activity. If they set up lots of discovery calls, that can be activity. If those things don't turn into anything, then we don't have productivity. Now, we could argue whether this is a sign of a particular a generation of sellers. It is, what we do know is that most of the sellers out in the market are actually quite motivated to drive productivity. It's not that they don't want to, right? They are very motivated. What we notice is that in many cases, they do have the knowledge, they do know how to do it, but when we listen to the gong calls, we don't see them doing it. We don't see them doing it correctly. We see that if we test them, if we certify them, they're good. But then when they're on a call, it's like what they miss is coaching. They miss, like the finesse touches on how to do this properly. And then, last point, we got so many tools. It's amazing, like how many tools we have in place nowadays. It's almost like tools. This is tool heaven. Now,
real quick, what I'm fascinated about what you're bringing up is that we got a huge explosion of tools, but what you're bringing up around activity versus productivity is the problem. Even though we have an incredible amount of new technology, ChatGPT, ways to be like sending out emails that have hyper relevance in it, we're still not getting the results. Like the efficiency of sales is still stagnant or even getting worse in some cases.
This is a fantastic point. I had about 20 CROs in a room with me, like about, it feels now 10 days ago or something like that. And I asked everybody point blank, the same question. We're all sitting around the table and I asked them the following question. Hey, if you got more opportunities to close, would your current team be capable of doing it, or would you need more people? Hands down, everybody said, no, I got enough people. I don't need more people to close more business. I just don't have the opportunities, or my win rate isn't there. But I have capacity. And this tells you, Dan, that the productivity, that we can up the productivity, which we're going to talk about. Fantastic point. Please feel free to interrupt. And I say this to Boris, to all of you. If you feel comfortable, you can put your mic off mute, or you can raise your hands and you'll pop straight up on our screen, and we'll bring you to the front. Next point is that this by itself was already a problem, but now what this is compounded by is that we see an increase in revenue churn. And where does this increase in revenue churn coming from? We have two year ends coming combined. We have the calendar year end that is was expired by the end of December, and we had the SaaS fiscal year end that ended at the end of January, which is the Salesforce schedule, so to speak. And as we see is that, like a lot of these contracts that have been closed previously disproportionately at the end of these two cycles are now up for renewal. What has happened is that, like we have so many SaaS services. We have over 20,000 SaaS services in play. Many would argue that we have close to 38,000 SaaS services in play, and that we see revenue churn. We see that, COVID surplus. We are dealing with a number of customers who benefited really a lot post-COVID, and they now have sold a surplus. And then we have industry-wide layoffs. Now, the industry-wide layoffs hit our market in multiple ways. Number one, obviously, if Amazon starts laying off 18,000 people, Philips 20,000 people, and so on, the amount of licenses we can sell to those companies churn. But what is even more problematic is not these fewer companies that sell these large amounts of licenses. What is very complicated for us? What?
I'm showing the slides.
Am I not showing the slides?
No, so we're jumping in. Just let me know which slide you want to show.
Oh, now we can see it. Yeah, this is beautiful.
Okay, go back 3 slides. Okay, go back. There, go 2 forward. Take it easy.
This one?
No, 2 forward. Okay, there we go. Sorry. It's fine. Hold it here. Yeah, thank you, Boris. Really appreciate it. Oh, now I can also look at the screen. Sorry, folks. We're doing this not from our normal studio. No, Boris, go back. Go back, Boris. There we go. And so what we see down here is that the revenue churn is now a problem, right? And so as we see that the revenue churn is becoming a problem, these industry-wide layoffs that we are experiencing are industry-wide layoffs between SaaS companies. So most of us in SaaS business, we are essentially selling to each other. Most of the time we're selling to each other. And so this moment in time that Our SaaS companies are laying off 10 persons at this company, 50 persons over there, and 100 persons on there. This all start to compound. That is happening with industry-wide layoffs. 2 more points. Next point is that the price to value is dropping. For example, in 2020, when we bought Zoom licenses for all of our people in the field, we ourselves, we ended up over the months that followed about 144. We checked the other day and we have 140 plus Zoom licenses. We got 118 people. I have no idea why we have 144 licenses. But first, we have that COVID surplus, right? We are paying for 144, we have 118 people. So we immediately are cutting the surplus. Next, you know, I love Zoom, but when we bought it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you know, like Google was not that good, but Google is pretty decent these days. And so we could argue, is it time for us to switch off Zoom and move to Google, because Google is already included with our services. That's price to value is dropping. And then we see market consolidation. We see multiple companies coming together, and email automation is now really very similar to some of the call recording tech companies and some of the automation. All these companies are more and more doing the same thing. So these are the issues that we're running into. Now, what I'm going to do is that I give you all these 4 issues. There we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sequence them. I'm going to say, like, look, when the growth is declining, as you see down here, right? When the growth is declining, that's gonna cause my runway to go down, right? Growth is declining, cost staying the same, because you can't lay off enough people to keep to constantly with your growth going up and down. So you're holding on to your people, your growth that is going down, your runway is going to come in. The problem is that this runway is coming in scaringly fast. Next, what you're going to see, you're going to see if the runway comes in, and you know, like, you're going to let go of people and you're going to get a productivity issue. Now, when I'm letting go of people, let's say in the next quarter, my productivity issue dials down. When my productivity issues dial down, I don't have enough resources to establish my growth again. Why? Because I was building the company towards the growth rate that I was destined to do. Now I got to go lay off because my runway is running down and I don't want to run out of money. And why don't I want to run out of money? Folks, you don't want to go in for a new round while your growth rate is down and while your cost is up. Your venture partner will either take advantage of the situation, right? Or they simply say, hey, you're not on the priority list for us to spend money on. Either way, problems. Now, what you'll see, I'm now adding the churn to it, which further declines that growth, which then in turn create a cycle of things that are going on. This is the problem. That's the problem that we're having right now. This thing is happening. Now, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, one thing, if you take nothing else away from this, I want you to go away from today's call with a sense of urgency. A sense of urgency that you need to do something, that you need to talk to someone, that this needs to be discussed. What we are anticipating, and I say this again, we're not speaking to a few CROs at a few companies. We have now spoken to a couple hundreds of CROs at different companies. I don't want to panic. Hold on, people. That's not what I want. What we can do, however, we cannot do, however, is that we just say, hey, let's see what happens next month and next month. That's not a wise situation. We have several months to prepare for this. And those companies that are preparing for this are going to be well suited not only to deal with the situation, also once it smooths out a little bit, they're already at pace in order to outperform. The key down here is this. I am not looking for you to establish your growth rate any longer and your growth targets of the year. That is becoming a secondary goal. My primary goal for you, and what we are educating companies like yours on, is that your primary goal moving forward is to establish an improved market position, because all your competitors are experiencing the same thing. And since all your competitors are experiencing the same thing, I want to make sure that you are getting a nosebleed advantage of them. Get an advantage. Get ahead of them. You're competing with your competitors for market share. And in this market share can be established. It can be established. You can improve your market share. And this is great. The reason why you wanted that growth always to be in place, because that growth rate was an indication that you were increasing your market share. Well, let's skip the growth and the growth rate measuring. Obviously, it's important that we keep growing. What I'm saying is make market share your ultimate goal. What I'm going to point out, this is a little insider info. you're going to see, and this is a heads up. What you'll see, these little, like counter directions, they're called eddies. It's a term from sailing. When you're sailing, an eddy is a counter stream. When a river goes really fast one direction, on the side of the river, on the outer edges, water is streaming in the other direction because a certain vacuum is created. You have this with currents in oceans and whatnot. It is a counter stream. You sometimes recognize it as a riptide. Lots of, water moving in, and in the middle, there's a counter direction of the water, a riptide. Same thing, eddy and a riptide are the same thing. Now, where I'm pointing out to you what is important for an eddy is an eddy can be of a great help. An eddy can right now be a market that is popping. I'm, not making light of the situation. I'm just trying to say, if you are able to address Russian, DDoS attacks, you have software to do that. You're probably in an eddy, an established eddy that you can tap. There's a lot of people who want your service right now. That's an eddy. It's a counter. An eddy can also be recruiting while everybody's laying off. An eddy can be going to a customer on site while everybody else is going off site. These are eddies. These are counter movements. What you want to make sure when you look at an eddy, that when you're seeing this trend happening, but there's a seller on your team who says like, well, actually, in construction right now, I have to say, this is fantastic. Well, that's an eddy. It's a sub-market that's counter. You can't put your entire company on the prediction of such an eddy. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's more of a nuance. Now, what we've seen, and I've showed this, this is part from the report I wrote. What we've seen is that this curve up is creating scalability, and this thing down is unsustainable. We were scaling up the revenue up till the end of 2020, and what does scalable mean? The more money I spent on GTM, the more revenue I got. The more money I spent on GTM, the more people I hired, the more revenue I got. But there was a disproportionate relationship between the two. When I spent twice as much money, I didn't get twice as much sales. I may have gotten 1.2 or 1.1 times. That caused unsustainability because I started to outspend in order to get the revenue. Now, when the cost became so high that, it was not only not profitable, but we started to run out of cost at a time that we're looking for funding. That market today is no longer responding to your growth rate. That market is now responding also to your cost center. That's the reason why that thing went down. That's the reason why suddenly companies who have gone IPO could no longer bear that price that they went public on. Why? Because the markets just did not appreciate the amount of cost that was involved. And for those of you who look this week at Salesforce, and when they published the results, you may have seen that we looked at 44 to 50% of the revenue was spent on client acquisition cost. Folks, I'm very used to seeing those numbers when a company is growing from 10 to $100 million, not when you're a multi-billion dollars, unless you're what Uber and companies like that. Okay, now what you'll see at the top, you'll see that unhealthy growth is growth as a function of growth rate, and healthy growth is growth as a function of growth rate and cost. Okay, now I'm going to explain to you briefly how this happened. Now, why? Because in this, what I'm explaining to you, how it happened and why this thing came crashing down, also lies a solution on how we convert this going back up. What I want to let you know is that the machine, the SaaS machinery, worked exactly as it was supposed to work. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. It worked as advertised, so to speak. Now, what you're going to see on the left, you'll see there's a quarterly indication. You'll see Q1 and so on. And I'm mapping that to what happened in Q1 of last year, and QN would be the quarter that we're in right now, QN being the 2023 first quarter. Horizontally, you're going to see booming, and so on and so forth. Now, what I'm going to depict, where you see my mouse move down here, you're going to see down here, marginal decline. We're seeing a marginal decline in numbers. We went from 15 in Q1 to about 14% CR1 in Q2. And then last year, and then went from 14 to 13, and from 13 to 12, and from 12 to 11, right? That's the motion we made down there. Then that was, for example, the marketing department generating or turning people on their website into MQLs. Then we had the lead development teams, and they went from 20% down here in CR2 from MQL to SQL, and they converted in the next quarter to 90%, and so on and so forth. every time they moved from that little marginal decline, nobody rang the alarm bell. You know, like, look, we normally used to convert to 20%, we're now converting at 19%. Well, it was a tough, you know, like what that really, you know, what was that a big difference? We can cover for that. We see lead flow going up or something like that, right? Well, we can go that. If I go to the win rate, CR4, you see here in this fictitious example that the win rate went down from 32% to 31%. And that then following the next quarter, the win rate went from 31 to 30%. But none of the sellers raised an alarm flag. They didn't go like, oh my gosh, we dropped from 31 to 30%. It's like, it's one more or less a quarter. How big is that, right? Like maybe a few deals we won and lost. So no major alarm. The problem is that when you compounded that over time, you'll see the impact in the ARR that brought in. It took these marginal small declines everywhere. When you calculate it out, they brought what previously was $69,000 in revenue from this particular model. It brought it down to $11,000. And I want you to realize, while you are still paying for the same marketing campaigns, while you're still paying for the same sales GTM motion, and while you potentially are still paying for the same customer success team, all that stayed in. So while suddenly that revenue collapsed in a matter of quarters, and for some in a matter of months, that machine came crushing down. And that machine came crushing down because of the action depicted in number 3. None of these conversion rates work independently. They all work as a whole. None of them work independently. That is what happened here. Now I'm going to pause here, Dan. Any question you have or any thought? I just want to get in a different voice, a tone of voice down here, since I am so hyped on Red Bull.
I think it was fascinating when you were mentioning that it's because of the incremental jumps that there wasn't an alarm bell going off. But now that we have a static thing to look at and we can compare to the past, like this is obviously an issue. And it goes back to what you were saying about the CAC to LTV ratio. If it's not specific enough or tight enough based on how fast this issue is approaching us, we won't be able to adjust, or it'll be even more detrimental in the future.
That's exactly right. And the other thing, Dan, now you say it, right? What also was really important, there is no person responsible for the entire thing. There's a person responsible for CR1, that may be the VP of marketing. There's a person responsible for CR2, that may be the head of sales of the lead development team, right? CR3 and CR4 may be the sales, the VP of sales. CR5, probably is finance and the VP of sales. But nobody is responsible for seeing the overall thing. So nobody has an eye for what's happening to the system. And this thing works like a system. It doesn't work independently. We can't say, oh, only one thing happened. That's why it all came crushing down. Now, it was supposed to work that way. We, for the past, when I either argue we have been on this trajectory since 2010 or 2012, let's pick 2012, which puts us a decade in. Since 2012, we have been greatly benefiting from this as all these marginal gains increase year after year or quarter after quarter, creating all this exponential growth left, right, and center. And many of you sometimes would have probably sat there, scratching your head, trying to think is like, why does that company grow so fast? Well, how can that grow? How can they grow so fast? How can they get such a valuation? That's because they trusted that this was working without often knowing it. Most companies have no idea how this works. And as a result, but they saw the results going up, like, who cares? It must be the seller selling more. It must be the leads that are generated. And so what I'm going to depict is that, like, if I want you to see that these things, right, consider these things happening. Hey, is this machine going to work? Is this economy suddenly going to turn around overnight? And Russia will stop invading Ukraine, geopolitics, American politics, all states the same thing. I'm telling you, it's unlikely that these things will change. So we're still in an evolving situation, that the churn is still going up and has not stabilized yet. We see that the demand for healthy growth. Look, there's very few people that will have a VC right now that says, hey, why don't you just, take a gap year this year, right? Like, just take it easy. We'll come back next year. We'll restart. No, you're burning money. So their demand for healthy growth is still there. And the system, if you do not operate it correctly, is highly volatile, right? And I love to say there's a question by Taylor. Curious, in this model, Is an alignment fix needed across the conversion rate? Yes. Is there a need for a complete reset or just focus on the top of the funnel? Thank you for asking that question, Taylor. What I'm going to do, I am going to, in a second, I'm going to say is like, hey, you know what? What if we can put individual actions that improve each of these individual conversion rate? What if I can put a stopgap on conversion rate 2? What do I need to do to put a stopgap on that? And what if I can stabilize CR2 and bring it back up? What action would I need to take? And what if I stabilize conversion rate number 4? What action do I need to take? So your question, Taylor, is the right one, but there's no overarching thing because that's the larger economy we work off. What there is we have almost immediately accessible to us the ability to make these improvements. Okay. These are the 5 improvements that I'm going to look on. Now, what we have asked, not all of these 5 were on my original list, right? Not all of them are. But, as of today, like I've been hearing that these are the 5 actions that most of the people that we are working with are asking me like, hey, this is what we see. This is what we can do in our business. This is the problem we see. And this is the way how we are planning in order to fix it. Number 1 issue that we hear from all CROs is there a way to make my sales prospect more? And what's the problem there? Number 2, and by the way, in a second, I'm going to vote, hold tight. Don't have to put it in the chat box yet. Hold tight. But in a second, I'm going to ask you which one of these 5 you get to pick 2 numbers. You pick, for example, 2,3. Pick 2. Which are your 2 most? I want you all to vote. Okay. But I want you all to vote. So please vote in a second. I'll first explain you what these 5 are. Number 1 is making sales prospect more. Make sure that you ask the sales department, hey, can you go a little bit upstream and help us generate leads, generate pipeline? Number 2, deals are being pushed out. More and more do we not see that deals are being lost, but that deals are being pushed out. Number 3, we see an increase in discounting. Since we see more deals not going into indecisive mode, we see more deals that are getting heavier discount. We see, for example, discounts that previously were in like the 15 to 20% range, suddenly be in the 35 to 40% range. And unfortunately, some of you have mentioned before, or higher, right? Number 4, we see decision complexity. We see that the CFO is now getting involved in the decision, increasing to the complexity, and often our sellers are very uncomfortable talking to the CFO. They're very uncomfortable because they haven't spoken to that person before. And 5th, we see the lack of an increase in productivity. We want to increase the productivity, but we don't know how. How do we get more of the people involved? How do we get them more productive? Okay, with that said, I would love to ask for you to go into the chat and type in if you can, what 2 are the most. Thank you very much. And Betsy kicks us off with 2 and 4. Pedro comes in 2 and 5. 2 and 4 from Natalie. 2 and 4. Okay, now this starts to flow. Michael, 2 and 4. Another Michael, 2 and 4. 2 and 4. 3 and 4. 2 and 4. 2 and 5. 3 and 5. Good to see you, David. DG, John, Lily, all of these. Yeah, that like right. Thank you, John. Like I'm feeling the how do you call it? I'm living with you. I see you. That's what I'm trying to say. 1 and 4 by Taylor Davis. Tony Page. Tony, are you the Tony Page from All Hair that I used to? You and I is that you, Tony? I haven't seen you in a while. If that's the Tony that I think it's Skystream we work together. Oh, sorry. No, thank you, Tony. I just thought that for a second. David Allen, good to see you, David. 3 and 5. Okay, so what we see that a lot of you folks are starting to say 2 and 4. 2 overcome indecision and 4 decision complexity. Well, congratulations. That's the ones that we hear all the time. 2 and 4 are all along. 3 and 5, which are all also heard. What we often find where they're happening is customers are in the high productivity and the managed discounting is with junior sales teams. We see that is an issue. Their sales team is just younger and therefore they start to rely more on discount. Okay, let's tackle these 5. Now, I'm at half an hour and we're going to, and we're going to be kicked out of here probably at 5 minutes past the top of the hour. So we're going to run in. And so I'm going to spend a little bit more time on 1, 2, and 4. That's where I'm going to spend most of my time. Okay. And, I'm going to skip I'm going to address them, but I'm going to give you the depth on 1, 2, and 4. So 1, what we hear CROs sell, literally almost pro verbatim, I need my sellers to prospect and generate their own pipeline. That's what they want. That's the problem that when we talk about number 1. In order to solve problem number 1, we have to understand that there are 2 separate activities. We have lead development and lead generation. In the world of winning by design bow tie, lead generation is CR1 and lead development is CR2. These are 2 different actions. If you have an enterprise sales team or a sales team that sells at $10,000 and above, you got to be very cautious, and we would advise against that. Sellers are going to go to generate leads. In other words, they're going to go cold outbound and have to manage and start creating email sequences and whatnot. For most companies, that will not work out. Why? The sellers may not have the tools in place. They may not have the training in place. And before we know it, they start spam emailing just the entire customer database. So before we can ask the sellers to generate, we got to give them some tools. We got to give them some training. We got to do some enablement. So be very careful before you do that. And in many cases, it is not even advised for sellers to go that deep into the pipeline or that much upstream, because they're simply, the level of efficiency and effectiveness is not it does not compare well to the income that they're making. Like having an SDR do that at like $50,000 to $80,000 is a meaningful way of spending your money, but spending a $200,000 to $250,000 seller salary on that is just not very efficient, and you're going to continue to drive up the cost. What you can see is that they can do lead development. That is what I'm going to take you through. They can develop leads, and developing leads is this problem that we run into that we need to understand is like, why are we having such a problem developing leads from our salespeople? I'm going to talk about 2 combined things that happen, and then, and I'm always a big believer, folks who are listening to me, if you know the problem, then you know how to solve it. And this may not be the right solution I'm presenting to you, but if you know what the problem is, and I give you a clear definition of where it comes from and how like what is happening, then I give you the tools to start thinking about solving it. The problem here, the real underlying problem, is that sellers post-COVID are no longer capable to network the same way they were networking. Most sellers develop quality pipeline, through one of these 4 or ABCD kind of like networking technique at the trade show, drinking coffee with someone. When you drink coffee, you're like, who got laid off? When you learn how did they go to another company? And so what you'll see, they used to do this in person in most organizations, right? And we had Dreamforce where we did that. And then 2 months later was another trade show and another trade show. We had events, we had customers offsites. During COVID, all those got wiped out. But remember what I said happened during COVID? During COVID, we suddenly had a big boom of people buying SaaS services. So they didn't have to network because the pipeline started to come in. Because all these companies are suddenly out there. So they're like, oh my God, I can't reach my salespeople any longer, or my organization any longer. I got to buy me some SaaS services. And so they went to buy SaaS services. So many companies became very inbound centric post-COVID, right? And when you see that, you even can look these days at the numbers, you see where layoffs were held. If you go to layoff.fyi, you can literally see the SaaS market wasn't laying off people during COVID. They were hiring after an initial spike, right? But after that, they were hiring. And why? Because the demand was so high. So they didn't need to network. But now the faucet has turned off. And now I need to teach them to network. And let me ask you, is your seller, your sales team, and I'm talking about the sales team that is, like I said, that makes $250,000 to $300,000 seller here in the US. Obviously, globally, those prices come down significantly, right? To about $100,000 to $150,000. But here in the US, we pay $250,000 to $300,000 for a reasonable enterprise salesperson. Is that person on LinkedIn trying to congratulate people when they are promoted into a new role, which they normally would do over coffee? But are they sending everybody, oh, Johnny's promoted, let me send him congratulations. Oh, you just promoted to CRO. Oh, Mark just got laid off at that company. Hey, let me check on what's going on with Mark. Oh, my customers that I called on 2 years ago is no longer with the company where I sold to him. He or she has now moved to another company. Let me send him an email. Let's see or her an email. Let's see what's going on over there. That is what is needed. but they don't have the skills because many sellers, typically enterprise sellers, are not good on LinkedIn. They are just keeping that operational for every now and then reaching out and getting some contact, but they're not sitting there networking like what is supposed to happen in this case. And their golf game, the coffees, the steak dinners, the drinks and the trade shows, they're coming back, but they're not coming back in the right market right now, and not in the high enough volume for them to recover. Okay, that is really what what we are seeing the problem. So we got to get them back to go networking. The first thing where we want them to start off with is you go to your checklist. Every seller need to go. Is your network still at the job that they were at last time you checked? Where are your big customers that bought from you, right? Stuff like that. It seems relatively mundane. I just want to let you know, folks, this is not happening right now. We may all agree that this is simple. The problem is not that it's simple or complex. The problem is most sellers are not doing it. And occasionally somebody's doing it. And guess what? They're the ones who are being successful. I'm going to skip this topic in the interest of time. Like what this talks about is that most marketing organizations reach out in an outbound email, primarily addressing the situation and the pain of a customer. This is historically comes out in an email, something like, hey, Jocko, I noticed that you are the CEO of company XYZ and that you are located in California. Companies like yours have this pain and this pain. I've attached a document to show you that a use case of how we help a customer. Would you be willing and open to meet me Thursday next week? That will be a situational pain. What you'll see, you probably get hundreds of these emails a week. This is no longer appropriate prospecting. I call this prospecting a la AKA 2021. Prospecting today should be prospecting on impact and critical event, not just on situation and pain. It should go deeper and farther. We should talk about, like what the impact is as it is relevant to the customer. I noticed that you recently had a layoff of 20%, and that probably will reduce your growth. Here, I have a solution for you, right? You're talking about impact. The last one here is decision criteria. What we notice historically is that, like I said earlier, there's new people involved in the decision. We suddenly see the CFO making an entrance. A post that I wrote about like a week ago or something like that, saying like, hey, we are starting to see a lot of that. An example that we heard of, and that is no longer an exception or a one-off. We now see that it has happened multiple times. Yes, you will be, Puntima, of course, you get to be the recording. Good to see you, Puntima. And so we will go doing a recording because, yes, it's good to share this with your SDR. Thank you. And so what we are doing right now is that with the decision criteria, with the CEO coming and getting involved, we see that a CFO jumps on the call, brings in a spreadsheet and says like, hey, here's my 50 SaaS services I have to whatever automate marketing and sales. Can you take me through and give me line item by line item? If I would buy your service, which ones can we switch off? That is a discussion that is being had right now because CFOs need to cut costs and they don't want to necessarily cut people. They want to first start looking at cutting costs. This is that decision that is happening. I need my sellers to prospect and generate their own pipeline. Make sure they start networking, a known network, and make sure that your marketing department starts reaching out in more relevance, which is based on impact and critical event. Overcoming indecision. As we pointed out, the number 2 was the most talked about. What I'm going to depict down here is this overcoming of indecision. I'm going to describe where it's coming from. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to overlay at the bottom. We see the sales stages. Many of you who've seen Winning by Design material before know that there's a blueprint coming. At the bottom, we see the sales stages. Do not worry about what the names are. Everybody calls these stages differently. I'm going to overlay in a 2-dimensional format, the activities. And the higher the activity go, the more engaged the customer is. The higher they go, the more engaged the customer is. More engagement can mean more senior engagement, can be like deep engagement from a person, but they're more engaged. They really want this. What you see here in the blue line is referred to as the consultative sale. And the consultative sale, you recognize that because it fluctuates a little bit. And this in generally leads us to believe that, like when that occurs, leads us to believe that you always feel that you're selling. This always feels like what we call uphill selling. You always have to work at selling, right? And so that is what that uphill sales feels like. You see the bubble going up once or twice or two times, right? And then the last time towards the handoff. So you go up. Consultative selling is generally earmarked by asking questions. So the diagnosis is an important role, determining decision criteria is an important role, and so on and so forth. Next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to overlay the provocative sales channel. Now, provocative is more like challenger sales, as you may know it, right? Like we're going to challenge the customer. Now, what you'll see down here, I suddenly see new things coming in that play a very important role. And this is not 100% accurate. I'm just trying to get you a sense of it, right? Like a more accurate process would be way more detailed. I'm just giving it for presentation perspective, giving you something to work with. And what we see down here is the provocation action that is here earmarked as G4. Is it G or is it, I cannot even, O4. And so what we see down here is that's kickstarting. I'm provoking the customer. I am the expert in the field. And as I provoke them, I'll see this go up. What I'm going to depict, if you kind of like understand this generic process, you get an idea that what we are seeing today is 3 specific playbooks being used. 3 playbooks. Number 1, people are using the playbook of forcing a decision by using a discount. Number 2, we're expanding more features and benefits. We're telling the customer we can do more for you if they're not making a decision. Why don't I bring in another expert on? Why I do another demo? We can provide you so much. Why are you not buying from me? There's so much value I offer to you. And then lastly, although many will not admit to it, the constant spreading of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This creation of uncertainty and this sowing on doubt often happens while even the seller doesn't know that they're doing it while they are doing it, right? Of course, you can, wait with a decision, Mr. or Mrs. Customer. I just want to give you a heads up that the market, ain't going to treat you better because of that, or something like that. They say some sentence that leaves some fear, uncertainty, and doubt behind. What we see that these things, that the deals that are being lost today are not lost because people are not using or not using this playbook. These deals are lost because people are shifting the decision out. It takes longer for the decision. We just spoke with a C-level officer at one of the, I think it's the largest SaaS company in the world. And the C-level officer, when she was on the phone with me, explained, Jocko, our problem is not that the decisions are not happening. They still are. Our problem is that decisions are shifting and taking a lot longer. Our problem is that we got to fly in more executives to help with closing these deals. Why is that? Because the indecision is shifting and shifting and shifting. It takes longer. And what you'll see, that locks up your resources longer. And now I got deals that push from 1 month to another month, creating this uncertainty in your pipeline. I got to bleed my resources that have to keep calling on that account. Gosh, if it only got lost, at least I can pull my resources off. But if these deals keep pushing forward, I got to keep all my people, got to keep selling on those accounts. And that often hurts me towards the end of the sales process the most. This indecision is felt the hardest after I've been selling to them for 6 months, after I've done a proof of concept, after I've answered the RFP and RFQ. Like, I did a lot of work, and now you're going to go indecisive on me? Like, my gosh. The second reason why a lot of these deals, or why you see this happen, is that more and more organizations are not having a sole person decision maker. They're having a decision team. And the moment in time that more people get involved, I get more complexity in that decision. By far, the reason why these deals are not happening, the number one reason, is because the fear of messing up is exceeding the fear of missing out. This is the number one reason right now, all across. You saw it in our survey that we took. Almost everybody had number 2. This number 2 comes from the fear of messing up is bigger than the fear of missing out. This is the problem. Messing up, people, if they buy an $80,000 product, for example, they can get fired over it. But sitting on that money and letting it roll for another quarter and making no decision, in many cases, is career-wise a better decision. So they let that decision roll. And if I have multiple people involved on the decision, then nobody on the team wants to really stick their neck out during an economy like this and say, like, I'll make the decision. So we see that the fear of messing up is bigger than the fear of messing out. FOMO is bigger than FOMO. This does not come from me. So those of you who are looking to, because it's it sounds like pretty cool to say stuff like that. This comes from a guy named Ted McKenna. And Ted figured this out by doing analysis on 2.5 million phone calls. And Ted wrote a book about that together with Matt Dixon. Matt, you may know, Matt Dixon wrote the Challenger Sales book, and they figured this out. Thank you, Michael, for giving a shout out to Jolt. Really appreciate that. We appreciate it. We have partnered closely with the team at Jolt. I would say that we're almost chatting every day, and we are one of their arms that helps them to train, right? We deliver the training. If you like Jolt, you go buy the book, but hopefully you come to Winning by Design to help you with the training on how to overcome this. What this training is based on, and I want to give you the simplest. I did not know. Dan, why don't you tell me what judging and indecision and the three things, why are they offset against each other? What did you teach me that I was doing wrong?
I think what's fascinating about what you're bringing in the top three, the creation of indecision. So not the creation, the realization of indecision. Often we've been trained as sales professionals to ramp up the FUD, but the problem with that is that you're raising fear in somebody that's already scared of making a decision. 56% of no decision is actually due to indecision, not just sticking with status quo. And your point about FOMO being the big difference, actually, I'll start writing a little bit. I know my screen will be small, but ultimately what we need to get better at is that when you judge the indecision, you have to do it in a specific way, because human psychology and some of the sociology experiments they've done, no one is going to tell you they're indecisive. 100% of the time, if they're like, hey, John, are you ready to make this decision? Every person will say yes. And that is like the insight that we need as sales professionals. That's like the deeper enterprise sales skill, is that you have to use something, a different technique to get somebody to give you information that is hiding beneath the surface. And one of those examples of trying to get rid of this fear of messing up and then not actually telling you that they're indecisive is by using a technique called a ping. And just like a boat would use it to look under the water and send out sonar and then see like, oh, there's a rock or a submarine or whatever. Like, you can't use discovery questions, stuff that's like above the surface that people will freely give you, and find out stuff that they're not ready to give you, stuff that's beneath the surface. So the ping technique, the anatomy of a good ping, is it's a close-ended question that's emotionally charged. Where this gets even more complicated is when you're at the end of a sales cycle, they've already done the demos, talked to your customers, they're like super excited to move forward. We hear happy ears. My old VP of sales is like, oh, like this deal, you got happy ears, you're not going to actually buy. I never believed that. But what I realize now is it sounds something like, hey, Jocko, love everything that Winning by Design is doing. I'm really excited about the different stakeholders that are involved. You got something for our product team, you got something for our sales team. This is going to be great. I'm going to go back to them. I'm going to show them the different packages you have, and we'll get back to you with next steps. Now, Jocko is a seller. Actually, Jocko, let me ask you, what are you picking up from that type of response I just gave you?
I feel like you're like not 100% sure that you want to go this route. I feel like there's a little, and that you're, there's uncertainty, obviously.
But it sounds all good, right? I'm like, I love you. And you're like, but you're picking up that how I'm saying I love you is it's got some cues that I'm uncertain. And this is what a pro seller needs to do. Jocko, I love that you love everything about our product. I'm glad that you see the benefit to your different teams, but I'm getting a sense that you're not exactly sure which configuration will be right for you, especially as we're going into this uncertain market. Am I picking that up correctly?
That is right, Dan. And like this, recognizing this level of indecision is the key. Recognizing that this happens and how it happens is the key thing that like you need to do. And so now what I want to make sure that you that we are seeing when this is happening, when you judge indecision, it is followed by one of three actions. I can either offer recommendations, and when I offer recommend, that's one option. I can say like, oh, have you looked at XYZ? I can limit expiration, or I can take risk off the table. Now, to go into that, taking risk off the table could be, for example, offering a smaller deal up front. Taking risk off the table could mean that we are establishing a mutual action plan, swinging through the deals. The point here is, the key thing I want everybody to realize is that your sellers are currently not trained on this. They're using A, B, and C, not D. And A, B, and C are making the indecision worse, like both Dan and I pointed out to you. And they are not aware. I compare this often to like drifting a car through a corner. Drifting a car through a corner, you got to steer the opposite route. Is it hard? No. Can you practice it? Yes. And when you practice a lot, can you get it figured out? Yes. Most people can figure out a way how to drift a car, steer the opposite way at the right moment in time. Once you know how to do it, you can repeat it. The steering the opposite direction is currently not happening. They don't know. What are they doing? They're on quota. Deals are floating around. They have a hard time closing them. They're going to increase the discount. Discount tells us like, hey, you're going to drive up the indecision. That has an adverse impact. What do we see? Q4, a lot of deals got shifted. This is the point. Okay. So, like thinking through some of these actions, you're going to get an idea like, I now understand number two. Number one, I know when I make sales prospect, my seller's got to learn how to network. Number two, they need to learn a new skill, which is overcoming indecision, recognize the situation, and then, start thinking about like, hey, am I going to offer a recommendation? Am I going to limit exploration if I recognize indecision? Am I going to take risk off the table? Managing risk, I'm going to briefly touch, and primarily the way I'm going to touch it so you can take a screenshot. We have a number of videos on this topic that you can download on our YouTube site free of charge. And you will see that this is referred to as trading. What we see here is that the discount is disproportionately increasing right now. We see this increase of discount going on, and it's costing us dearly. First of all, it leads to indecision. And second of all, those deals that are closing at a lower win rate. If you measure your quarter over quarter win rate, we see win rates go down from high 20%, 28, 29% to low 20%. And we are seeing more and more that we're in the teens to the low teens. I just walked out of an account, renowned number, and a renowned company. 1 in 10 is their current win rate. 1 in 10 from the moment they demo to the moment they close. 1 in 10 qualified demo, qualified opportunity to close rate. 1 in 10. That's huge. And then if I start giving discount, now I get hit on both sides. I got a lower win rate, I win fewer deals, and I win at a bigger loss. What we are saying is that not necessarily do you have to make these discounts that big. There is no known relationship between discounting and win rate. And so in this concept, we recommend that you teach training. Where can I find, and I'll let somebody answer that question via chat. I got Farina ask a question where, there we go. Thank you very much, Dan. And so managing discount is a key skill. What I would like for you to do, simple action to see how big this problem is. Take all deals either from January, if you have a high volume amount of deals, or off Q4, if you generally per month work on a low volume of deals. Line up all the deals, get all the discounts. Your finance department or your FP&A team, if you're bigger, can deal with this. I want to know the top, like all the deals we closed and how much discount did we give. And if I see 25%, 20%, 25%, 30%, 25%, 30%, we're giving a lot of discounts away. That's a lot of money we're giving away in the time that these few people that are buying. That's where we can't keep giving the store away to these folks. 2 weeks ago, renowned company, 60 sellers, approximately 50 had increased the discount level to in excess of 50% due to the lack of pipeline. Excess of 50%, folks. That not only means that you got to close twice as many deals, but twice as many deals at that low of a win rate. I gotta use, and I now have to multiply that by the amount of leads I need, right? I may need to like 10 times more, 20 times more leads. It's, like you can't keep going like that. Last point I'm going to make, increased productivity we'll keep for another day. The last point I'm going to make is decision complexity. And decision complexity, what we are noticing, if I drew it down here to the right, you'll see how our decisions are made. We see an incredible lack of people knowing how in enterprise, deep enterprise sales techniques, and in particular, in the way how to navigate an organization. And in particular, when the CFO is getting involved, which is becoming part of the gatekeeper team. And so what we now see is that organizations no longer have the skill set. I explain to you where this comes from. Post 2008, during 2008, in the 2008 crisis, the burst of the real estate market, we were reliant on a number of senior executives in the sales team that had some skill developed during the 2002 internet bubble burst. And those people matured into 2008 and came into the field with an experience set. Those people, were in those days around their mid 40s to mid 50s. They have aged out of sales. Since 2008, we have predominantly being an inbound-based market with a high volume of SaaS opportunities, reflected in the amount of IPOs, reflected in the amount of SaaS companies started. I mean, we started 20,000 SaaS companies in the last 14 years, people. 20,000 more. Some would say 35, 40,000. We were selling in a greenfield. So the skill of overcoming and managing complex decisions cycles is no longer present in the current enterprise sales teams. And I mean in the enterprise sales team. I don't mean my SMB sales team doesn't know it. No, it's even my salespeople who don't know these techniques any longer. They need to learn how to navigate an organization. They need to learn. And very common what we see is that they mistake the decision maker and the champion. And what they're dealing with is they're working with a champion who they think is the decision maker. Very common mistake. What I recommend down here, in order to wrap today up, what I recommend is that you establish a 3x3. It's the quickest band-aid that we can do right now. Establish a 3x3. 3x3 means 3 people from your organization on a qualified account, in the process, in the late stages of the qualified account, should be talking to 3 people on the customer side. Your sales engineer may hook up with their technical specialist or their a database architect or something like that, right? Your CEO may be introduced to their EVP of sales in a large company or something like that. But you create 3 on 3. When you do that, we've seen companies that have established at least 3 relationships have a significant higher win rate, significant higher. So by establishing this 3x3, although originally it's correlation based, you will start to see that causality will start increasing that win rate. This gives us an idea of some of the challenges that we're having. And I trust that you folks can take a screenshot of this and then, noodle on this over the days to come. But this is the problem. We see all these problems in the yellow text boxes occur right now. We have, created a term around that, is that we are lacking deep enterprise sales skills at this point. Not just, obviously, sorry, but look, we saw this coming, and I'm going to give it straight away to you folks. We developed all training programs for that, right? So if you later on want to say, hey, can we help for this? Hallelujah. Yeah, we saw this coming. And you may recall that I launched the Deep Enterprise Sales Skills program in November of last year because we saw this coming. Right, we already experienced this earlier. We started to see this at some of the advanced companies or that were further ahead over the summer. Because, oh my God, this is going to not go well. Okay, increase productivity, I leave for another day. That means turn your managers into coaches. Okay, what we see now is if we put them in the right order and we see it's hey, where would we start? I can only do one thing. If you can only do one thing, overcome indecision. Because if you overcome indecision, you already learn how to not start discounting because you can't do that because overcoming indecision. Second is you need to get the right people in the room. So you're going to work on decision complexity. And in that process of, if you overcome a decision, your win rate is going up and your sales doesn't need to prospect, because I rather have my sales working on closing deals than generating leads, because generating leads does not automatically generate revenue. Closing deals does. So that's the reason why I put them in this motion. Increasing productivity is by far the best activity. It just takes a very long time to get results. You can't start coaching, teaching people how to coach overnight and expect immediate results. That's the reason why I numbered them in 1 to 5 this way. Overcome indecision is the first one. If you do that, wrapping up and making sure that I'll ending on top of the hour and trying to respect your time. And I will hang on for questions. For those of you who want to ask questions, we can either chat, but I will wrap it up for those of you who are on the clock to make sure that we have a nice end time. When you might do small changes, you make small changes, you do them repetitively. Those of you who are familiar with winning by design, you know, marginal gain gets you double the result. 10% improvement across seven improved meetings, metrics, and whatnot leaves you double X. Folks, that is that. I want to thank you with that. I'm going to switch the screen share off. And I want to let you know that I am really appreciative of you folks being here with us today. Again, sorry, challenges with some of the challenges. We're doing this remote. I'm making sure that all of you get the right info at the right time. With that, for those of you who hung on, thank you very much for being with us. And for those of you who want to ask questions, I'm going to count down. For those of you who want a graceful exit, in 5 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bye-bye. Everybody else, I'm here for questions if you want to ask. That's some, yeah. Ruud Kampenstein. Ruud, you must be a Dutch guy. Kampenstein is written with the I and the J. That's a very Dutch write-up. Okay, with that said, anyone questions? Brian, Michael, Ocean, Ruth, Constantine, Daniela, anyone questions? These are the automated note takers of everybody. Well, if there's no questions and keeping you all on time, folks, thank you very much for being with us today.
Jocko, I'll jump in with one. I was trying to come off mute.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've been playing around with, and I'll start my video here too. My bandwidth's been bad today. One of the things we've been focusing on with overcoming indecision has been around not necessarily giving a discount or using a discount to help with it, but essentially we do a heavy upfront implementation and removing some of the implementation cost if they sign sooner. Are you saying that could potentially lead to further indecision? I mean, I can explain a little bit more about what I mean by that.
So do I get it right? Do I get it right that you contemplate, you say like, hey, I already give a discount anyway. Why don't I try to buy out my competitor or something like that 2 months old?
No. So we do a lot of heavy upfront implementation for our customers on getting them ramped. We're a usage-based tool, so we do a lot of work for them, and we traditionally will charge, depending on the size of the customer, up to say 20 grand for that. We've talked around using that as, hey, if you sign by the end of the month, we'll reduce that in half, or we'll give some level there to help with, even from a risk reduction side of the house, because we're a usage-based tool. We're going to do the work anyways if they're a great customer. So we're even willing to go up to free for the right customers. So are you saying that might be
key of Jolt, which is taking risk off the table? What you're describing is you're creating a safety net for the customer because you're ensuring their success. So if they're having, I think it's the third type of indecision, if they're worried about getting results and that's what's delaying or causing their indecision, the move that you're making is perfect, because you say, hey, I believe in what we're doing. I believe in the success that we can do. And in fact, if you're willing to help me out, and I think that's the key, is that you can't give the discount for nothing. It's the trade-off. You say, hey, I understand we're in this market. I'm committed to making this successful. I can figure out a way to drop our internal costs and then pass those savings on to you in exchange for. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people make, is they don't make that clear trade-off to the customer. They rely on some form of discount to drive, and
just to get the deal over the line.
Yeah, it's not as effective. People aren't buying or indecisive because they're like, oh, if I wait another month or two, I'll get an extra 10% off. That's not the cause of indecision. It's usually the fear of messing up, and you're solving that in the correct way by creating that safety net.
Perfect.
Fantastic, Dan. Thank you for answering that. That's fantastic. There's nothing to be added. Dan said it perfectly.
Thanks, Jocko.
Okay. With that said, if there's no, I'm not in a hurry. I'm just making sure that all you folks, I want to thank you all. I mean, like, we pulled this off at the last minute. We wanted to give you feedback. We're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep throwing these sessions out there. I believe that in the coming months, we're all in this together. We got to get through this. The outcome of this will be great as usual. SaaS is destined to be great. SaaS was born from a crisis and always done great in crises. And so if we work together, we'll figure all this out. With that said, I want to thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you there next week. Bye-bye.